Nike was created in 1971 by a man named Phil Knight. He was a professor at Portland State University. He had his students make the logo, and he sold them out of his car. Punk was a fashion in the late 70s. They used ripped or slashed up clothing, safety pins to hold up the clothes together. The clothing usually clashed. They had spiked dog collars and usually spiked bright colored hair. Their tattoos were extremely noticeable. Finally, I'm going to touch on glam. Started by David Bowie in 1972, he had red hair, a skin-tight catsuit, and makeup. Elton John was also part of this trend. He had glasses and platform shoes.
Unless you were living under a rock, everybody knows about President Nixon. In 1972, this is when 5 men were found burglaring the Watergate Hotel. Later, a $25,000 check earmarked for Nixon ended up in one of the burglars' accounts. While Nixon was re-elected president against McGovern, the Watergate scandal was still being pursued. The end of his presidency started when Vice President resigned in 1973, and Ford would now be the new Vice President. When the investigations continued, Nixon resigned in 1974. Ford is now president, and yes, Nixon was a crook. And now, a word from our sponsors.
Making things look like what a sight, making things look like bright.
Light Bright, the toy that lets you create beautiful pictures with light.
Light bright, making things look like.
Work with colorful pegs that glow with light, light bulb not included. Make people, animals, things, and with refills, Bugs Bunny or Bozo the Clown.
Light bright, making things look like.
You can make lots of pretty pictures with Light Bright from Hasbro.
Finally, we are on to report on the war in Vietnam. The war in Vietnam started in 1955, but it ended in 1975. Americans left Vietnam 2 years before it ended on March 29, 1973. Vietnam was misreported then, not by me, and misremembered now. The total deaths were 58,148 people died. The average age of a deceased was 23. United States didn't lose that war. The South Vietnamese did. When the U.S. Congress started cutting off their funding, the South Vietnamese ran out of fuel, ammo, and other supplies because of a lack of support from Congress, while the North Vietnamese were very well supplied by China and the Soviet Union. And that's just the way it is. Now on to something completely different.
Hey, bring our book back!
Hey, how about a nice Hawaiian punch?
Sure.
Hawaiian punch. Wasn't that a refreshing commercial?
onto television and film with Walter.
Good
luck, Archie.
Jeez, will you stifle me? You're about to go on camera here. Thank you, Walters. That was a fine, decent American over there. Ain't no commie hippie crap in this station. Not like them heaves over at the other network. They're selling this country down the river. Anyways, there's a show MASH out there. It's about these doctors in Korea. 1 minute they're having a fine time, next they're serious. I'll tell you, it wasn't like that in WW2. We respected authority. I think the show is a pinko plot to overthrow the government. Hey, meathead, change the graphic, you stupid Pollock. And finally, you have this darky show called Soul Train. Sheesh, they're dancing and shaking private parts all over the place. And those clothes, that sure ain't good fashion. Anyways, thank yous for your time.
You look so handsome, Archie.
Ah, sheesh, Edith.
Thank you, Walter. Walter Cronkite here with the entertainment news. The 70s changed the way movies were made. They were grittier, more violent, and showed the darker worldview. Movies such as Serpico, The French Connection, Mean Streets, and one of the most iconic movies, the most iconic line ever, was Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry. Well, punk, do ya? Social satire was a theme taken to new heights by Mel Brooks with Blazing Saddles. The dark underside of America and organized crime was explored by by Francis Ford Coppola in The Godfather. And Sylvester Stallone hit it big with Rocky. And then, yes, Star Wars, the big budget, big movie that changed everything about the way movies would be made in the future and what was considered science fiction, brought it back. The 70s saw the demise of the studio system and a new breed of filmmaker. Influenced by John Ford and Akira Kurosawa, men like Scorsese, Coppola, and Spielberg and Lucas changed the way movies will be ever made. And finally, as this decade comes to an end, the new decade begins, that's the way it was.